We put Rick's out.
We weren't expecting you.
Well, I did, well, I left my wife sitting in a chair. You can't get up.
Never got to find a seat. We'll get a
Oh, yeah, we gotta get another chair.
chair.
Act like we like each other, it's good.
Hey,
Oh,
or chair back.
Look at this.
I don't know, I'll sit in your lap.
Have
Go,
Slide over.
all that many, we have to. Yeah, we'll get one.
All right, who wants to go home?
I'll take your car. You ever seen it?
Yes.
I don't get one. I'll take yours. You sure? No, I'm gonna go get one. Oh, you take the-
Oh, the chair's coming.
Everything such as.
Commissioner, yeah, sorry.
Way over here. There we go.
No, that's fine, sorry.
Look at this.
By showing up for the full agenda.
Almost there.
Thank you.
I've never seen this many people. Like that, Chris.
Right.
Right.
I'm like.
Rich, how do you feel about the invitation tonight?
I did it last one.
So you're used to it.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
You try to put me on the spot again.
It's that awkward silence right
Yeah.
We're all watching McSwanwick.
Everybody enjoying the heat?
Absolutely.
I'm melting.
I'll see on your guide over there.
Did you see?
Yeah.
I saw your Instagram, the Instagram post. You were out there.
You said hi to me, you were sitting, I was sitting on the dock, reading the book.
That was not you.
That was me.
That wasn't you.
That was me.
You're doing this. I think that's Jennifer's neighbor.
Nope, that's Jennifer.
I did not know that. I thought you were next door. I know I should have went with it, but just being honest, I truly thought that was your neighbor.
Yep, nope. that
Because
was-
aren't there two of you that you have, that's your neighbor? Okay. Well, I didn't have my glasses on.
It's all good.
You
You were friendly.
should have jumped out there with.
I was thinking about it, but I was a little tired, so.
That's.
We just gotta get Wendy out there.
Yeah. I tried to get her out of the pontoon
Uh-huh.
Saturday.
That was a selective hearing.
She's ignoring you.
All right.
All right.
Oh,
Ready? We'll call the July 11th, 2023 meeting of the Winter Haven Planning Commission to order. Jordan, if you will, please take roll.
David Lane,
Here.
Mario Manigo,
Here.
Elizabeth Davis,
here.
Jennifer Fasking,
Here.
Wendy Venters, here, Colin Wells,
Here.
Rick Hemingway,
Here.
Tina Summerlin,
Here.
and Craig Ford. We have a quorum.
If you would, please lead us in invocation and pledge. Please stand.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you again for the opportunity to serve the citizens of Winter Haven. Give us wisdom and help us make the right decisions. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Have the commissioners had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting? If so, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the June 6th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Second.
All right, we have a second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, minutes are approved. I'll do a brief explanation of how the hearing will go. The cases will be read into the record. City staff will provide a presentation and commissioners will have an opportunity to ask questions questions of staff. Once all the commissioners have had a chance to ask questions, we will close the planning commission hearing and open the public portion of the hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against a case, starting with the applicant, may do so. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. Once everybody from the public has had opportunity to speak, we will close the public hearing and reopen the planning commission hearing and ask any additional questions or entertain a motion and call for a vote. If anybody from the public is here that thinks they may speak for or against any case, if you would please stand and Jordan will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case shall be the truth?
All right, we will jump right into new business. The first case tonight is case number P-23-37. Request by Tim Campbell to rezone a parcel from industrial light I-1 zoning district to planned unit development PUD zoning district. General location 2200 3rd Street Northwest. The area covered by this request is 22.57 plus or minus acres.
Okay, I'll be presenting this item this evening, and for some reason I can't get my key. There it goes. The picture on the screen is the aerial showing the subject property. As you can see, it's the Old Florida Distiller site. It's located on the north side of Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. The Channel Lakes Trail runs along the western side of the property, and then the city's motor pool complex is located to the north across Motor Pool Road. As you can see, a predominantly to transitional area. As you move east, you get into more of a residential character. As you get into the greater Florence Villa neighborhood, as you head west, you head into the more commercialized uses around the US 17 Havendale Boulevard intersection. This is a future land use map. The property is designated as primary activity center, as is a majority of the adjoining properties. The exceptions being the city's motor pool complex to the north and the Channel Lakes Trail. Likewise, the zoning, this is a kind of a mixture of zoning use in districts in this area. The subject property is zoned I-1. To the north, the city's facilities are zoned institutional. And then we have a predominantly got commercial C3 to the south and towards the west. As you head east, you get into a mixture of R3 multifamily, some MX mixed use, and then some R2 single family. This is a view of the property. This is from Martin Luther King Boulevard. Again, it's a older 1930s, 40s era industrial facility. This is a newer addition built back in the 1990s. This is on 2nd Street Northwest, looking into the property. This is looking back at the property from Motor Pool Road. And then to the north again is the city's motor pool and public works facilities, and then the city's wastewater plant much further off in the distance. To the east, we have some vacant lots, Sportsman Park, and then we have a mixture of single family and multifamily uses. And then to the south, we have some vacant C3 property. We've got some offices in the distance. Just off to the left of the screen is a Family Dollar. And then we have, I believe it's in the Salvation Army, or yes, to the south there at Unity Way. And then to the west, we have the Channel Lakes Trail linear park system that extends from downtown to Lake Alfred. Little background: requested by Tim Campbell to rezone this parcel from industrial I-1 zoning district to planned unit development. Property does contain approximately 22.57 acres, consists of 3 industrial warehouses and supporting infrastructure. They have been constructed and modified between 1930 and 2001. Total enclosed space is approximately 181,500 square feet. Fisher looks to redevelop the subject property with a mixture of multifamily, residential, and commercial uses while maintaining the older industrial buildings and some warehousing uses on an interim basis. Maximum development intensities will follow the standards contained in the primary activity center future land use. At this time, sufficient potable water and wastewater capacity is available to support the maximum potential development of the subject property under the requested PUD. However, there is not sufficient capacity on Martin Luther King Boulevard to accommodate all trips should the highest maximum potential build out occur. However, a percentage of potential trips will likely be internal capture trips or utilize on other unmonitored local roadways accessing the property. It must be noted this property is located in the city's transportation concurrency exception area and therefore is not required to comply with transportation concurrency requirements. With regards to the PUD, the conditions provide standards addressing the following: lot and building requirements, landscaping, signage, roadway and pedestrian connections, and electric vehicle charging. This is kind of the conceptual plan that's been submitted to us. It identifies 5 general development tracks. Each has a kind of set amount of development that would be permitted on it. Unfortunately, it's not that visible on this scale. But overall, everything generally follows the primary activity center future land use. In conclusion, petitioner's request to rezone the subject property from I1 to PUD is consistent with the underlying primary activity center future land use. The requested PUD is consistent with the unique or innovative design techniques required for establishing a PUD as provided in section 21-373D of the Code of Ordinances. The requested PUD is consistent with the Florence Villa CRA plans, goals, and policies, and the subject property has been identified as a catalyst redevelopment site by the plan. And there is adequate water and wastewater to serve the maximum potential build out of the property under the requested PUD. And finally, upon maximum build out under the requested PUD, there will not be sufficient road capacity on Martin Luther King Boulevard. However, the ability for internal capture of a portion of these trips, the ability to access other streets on the street grid, and the direct connection to the Chain Lakes Trail will serve to mitigate those deficiencies. Therefore, staff does recommend the Planning Commission recommend approval of this request and is forwarding the City Commission for final action. And that concludes my presentation.
Any questions from commissioners? All right, we will close the planning commission portion of the hearing and open the public portion. Anybody from the public wishing to speak for or against? Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Tim Campbell with Clark Campbell Pastor Workman and Earth, 500 South Florida Avenue in Lakeland. I'm here tonight representing Haven Realty Properties, who's the owner of the property. With me tonight is Mr. Manny Organic. He's the owner of the property. And so we appreciate the staff recommendation and we've been working very closely with them. This all started actually as a city initiative through your CRA to create a plan for the redevelopment of some vacant parcels in this area of the city. And so the city had the Lunds Group come and do a very nice plan of what potential developments could occur in this area as it develops and converts over time. The existing 3 warehouses are currently leased and occupied, so they are active. And the idea was to start this transition over time on the north end by providing multifamily units. And the desire would be to do some workforce type housing in multifamily. I'll tell you, when I read the transportation limitations, you kind of look back a little bit, but I can tell you with the densities that are allowed in this land use, which is often the case in multifamily, the size of the multifamily development won't be governed by the maximum density. It will be governed by the amount of open space and parking spaces and stormwater management. So I think you will find, while the staff has to give you an analysis based upon if every bit of density was used on this site, I think you will find that's not really possible. And you saw from their staff report and recommendation that there are mitigation factors and internal capture issues that will address that issue as we go through time. When we first started this, we actually were going to just come in and do the northern parcels, seek a zone change from the industrial and move forward in that manner. But because the city had invested time in kind of a visionary plan for the entire property and the owner wanted to follow suit, we came in with a PUD for the entire property. And what it does, it allows some alternative uses over time as the markets drive the uses and the additional transition can occur over time that, hopefully some of those warehouses go away over time and are replaced with additional multifamily, commercial or office uses to further boost the kind of the economic impact in that part of the city. Someone asked us about kind of the timing on the multifamily in the north. Like every other multifamily development that's going on in Winter Haven or throughout the county, the market has a lot of impact right now with interest rates that are really impacting multifamily development, with construction costs. And then one I just recently learned that I didn't really think of are insurance rates, because as your construction costs rise, the cost to insure these per unit has gone up significantly. So, but for market forces, the owner had already started design work with an architect and was planning to develop sometime in 2023. They're still watching these rates as they have risen so highly and seem like they may rise some more. But their goal is to begin this multifamily, at least on the first phase, as soon as possible as market conditions warrant. We do want to address just a couple of issues in the staff report, and we've talked to your staff about them and kind of the rationale for it. In paragraph A2, it talks about the legacy warehouse uses, because within this land use district, it's my understanding that they don't really support warehouse into the future for this land use classification. And so the goal of your staff was to address if a legacy warehouse sits vacant and they had for up to 18 months, or if the warehouse was damaged beyond 50%, the condition says the right to continue the legacy use shall cease. And what we talked to them about, two things. One, if, as far as the timing, if a warehouse goes vacant, and we've all heard the economic forecasts for the next several years, it will be in the best interest of both the city and the property owner to be able to reoccupy that space as soon as possible with a warehouse user, if that's appropriate. And if the market supports it and there are users, then they can begin the transition. And so our request was that instead of 18 months, it is 60 months unless extended by the city commission. And we've talked to staff and they can address their thoughts about that. With respect to if a structure is damaged by more than 50%, we have leases for each of those properties, that some of which require us to reconstruct damage. And so having that condition in our zoning would actually place the owner in a legally impossible position of having to contractually reconstruct damage while not being allowed to do so from the zoning ordinance. So I've provided to staff some suggested revised language on that issue, but I want to explain the rationale. We want the same thing that the city wants. We want good and appropriate redevelopment over time, but we have to do it within reason as far as what the market is and what the market supports. And right now there are 3 warehouse users who continue to use that property. And so we want to be able to do that until such time that the transition of uses is warranted. The second condition we want to address is D2, which is about transportation, and it's about the internal sidewalks. The condition is drafted, talks about on both sides of the internal roads. And we've just requested that it be on one side. Because of the density and the compactness of these sites, we think that the sidewalks on one side of the internal roads will be sufficient. And part of that rationale in an effort to provide workforce housing for reasonable prices, we're just sensitive to the costs, and that both took up room within the development and impacts and involves an additional cost. So we would respectfully request that those 2 conditions be revised accordingly. We're very pleased to present this. We've enjoyed working with staff. We think it's a win-win to have the PUD that locks into place the uses, but looks into the future and allows the owner to convert and transition those uses as soon as it's warranted, and to kind of have pre-designed and pre-planned and pre-visioned what those uses can be. So with that, we request your favorable recommendation and stand available for any questions that you may have.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Me? What are you expecting in terms of of the traffic in and out of the area that you are talking about. Those roads are already pretty busy, aren't they?
The initial for so the traffic's already there for the warehouse uses. The vacant parcels will be converted to multifamily, which will access Motor Pool Road on the north side. They won't be driving through the warehouse developments for ingress and egress. And I'm not aware that there are traffic congestion issues that they'll have to address, but those are things as we process a site plan with your staff, we'll have to address any of those issues at that time.
Thank you.
I can elaborate on that just a little further. One of the provisions of being in a transportation concurrency exception area is they will have to submit a traffic study to us for review. That would occur at the time of site plan review. The other thing is Mr. Campbell is correct. This will not likely develop anywhere close to what the maximum permitted by primary activity center is. Just for example, today there's currently approximately 1,300 trips available on Martin Luther King Boulevard. That does support quite a bit of commercial or multifamily residential. So there is actually a good bit of capacity on this roadway today.
Right, thank you.
Mark, so you said that it's going to be workforce staff housing, or is that equivalent to, are you saying that's going to be like affordable housing, or that at market rate?
So there's always such discussion and confusion about what's affordable, what's workforce. Typically market is your full rate, class A, class B apartment communities with the kind of the maximum rates in the market. Affordable typically are often relates to some subsidized rents, which I do not think is part of the plan. Is that right? And so workforce housing, and I'll tell you, so I've had the fortune of representing a lot of multifamily developers throughout that spectrum, and I've learned a lot. And in these market conditions, whether fair or not, it's the big boys who are going to develop, and they have the staying power, and their product is probably pretty tried and true because they do it all over the country. So what came before you, Alliance, which is the largest multifamily developer in the country, did a project in the city of Winter Haven called Pros Winter Haven. And they're the biggest multifamily developer in the country. And theirs is considered workforce housing, which just means they're just, they tend to be a little more efficient. You know, some of them, there are less amenities. Some of them, they're just more efficient. With Alliance, they're just a very efficient multifamily developer. So they're able to build en masse and have some economies of scale, but their rents are a little better that kind of are more appealing to your kind of your general workforce of, you know, police officers and firemen and teachers and just kind of that kind of thing. But there's not a great definition, and there's a lot of discussion all the time, but it's not affordable. It's not a subsidized housing, and nor are we going to suggest it's a, you know, a type A class, top of the market rents.
No, I appreciate that, because when we speak about our firefighters, our policemen, and our, you know, nurses, or folks that work in public service that also look for housing to live in, some of the market rates that we currently utilize now, they can't afford. So that's why I'm trying to understand and distinguish of how we're selling it to the community, and if that's the plan, then I just want to make sure that we're really doing what we're saying that we're going to be doing for the community.
Right. You know, I'm a resident of Polk County too. So as I represent all these folks, I'm like, my gosh, that's a lot of units. And what I learned that was refreshing to me, that may answer part of your question. Some of them say, you know, when that Polk County, including the city of Winter Haven, doesn't really have a lot of the type A, the A class, the highest end of the, and there are some going in the county. They said once that happens, they attract the renters who are able to pay those rates, who are now in kind of class B of like 5 different classes in their world. So the apartment communities are able to charge them more than really is appropriate for type B because of supply and demand. as you get more units on board, what you will find is necessarily those rents are going to get a little more reasonable as you get more units and you get more of a diversity of the types of multifamily communities you have in the city.
Good question.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm clear. I heard you share some things that are different than what was in the fact sheet. So how do we resolve that in this conversation tonight?
Okay, I'll provide you my take on the recommended changes. I'll start with the easy one, the sidewalks. As staff, we generally do not have an issue with that proposed change. There are provisions in the standard code in some scenarios that will let you do one side of the street. So that's not unprecedented within the city, so we can certainly support that requested change. The one that gets a little trickier is the one that's in condition A2. And what we're trying to do is we need to respect what's in the comprehensive plan. While it does allow for limited industrial in the primary activity center, it's clear the goal is to kind of start transitioning that use out. Likewise, the Florenceville CRA plan also contains policies and objectives to slowly transition those uses out as well. So staff feels that there needs to be some provision in there that says at some point the industrial warehousing use needs to find its way out once, you know, its time has come. And the language we used in here is obviously as long as it's occupied and functioning, okay, we're fine with that. It's the minute those uses start to go vacant and then we get vacant buildings, we're looking to start that transition process. Now, we originally proposed 18 months. That's, you know, typically a year longer than our standard 6-month, you know, non-conforming provisions where you lose the right for that use. So I've opted to go a year longer, given we know we have occupied buildings and, you know, it may not be the easiest to transition out of those warehouses. I suggested maybe we could be on board with something like 36 months or 60 months. But somewhere we have to have a provision in here to ultimately say, that's it. With regards to the ability to continue if the property is destroyed. Ideally, we would like to keep that language in there, but we also recognize that if there's legal obligations that may be detrimental to the overall site redevelopment, I think we have to take that into consideration as well.
So Sean, if there's a case where there's a lease that has this sort of provision that predates the damage, I mean, is that?
I would say that that's something that we should be at least accounting for at this point, is those legacy leases that goes with the use, obviously. But I think at the end of the day, we're just looking to make sure there's a point where, you know, that the industrial is going to start going away.
Tim, can I ask you a question on, you had asked us for 60 months. Can you envision a scenario where your client would leave this property vacant for 60 months? I mean, market conditions aside, I mean, I can't imagine we'd be in that position for 5 years from a vacancy or.
We talked about that exact thing sitting outside, that if it's vacant for 60 months, we're in trouble and you're in trouble.
Right.
It's not a good thing. And we understand, and remember, we voluntarily brought this into the PUD to let it be master planned. But I recognize that, you know, the point Sean made, that if not, there's still the kind of the loss of the grandfathered rights use, or that happens after 6 months, I think he just said. Our goal is to not place this property in a position where we have to discontinue a warehouse use, which could at that time be the only possible economic use of the property. And then just because of a zoning condition, it sits empty, which doesn't benefit the city or the property owner. No, we certainly hope and pray that there doesn't come an instance in which a warehouse that's there now is vacant for 60 months.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions of the candidate or the applicant? Mr. Campbell, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public wishing to speak for or against? If you would please stand, I think Jordan needs to swear you in. You're fine. When you approach, if you would please state your name and your address, and then we'll have Jordan swear you in.
It's Nikki Tucker at 234 Avenue V Northwest.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case shall be the truth?
Most certainly. Yes.
Thank you.
My question about this, and I was hoping I was come here to see some type of pictorial view of what this is going to look like, but now that I'm hearing that this may not take place for 18, 36, 60 months, I would have been so much more happier if I could see what the vision is, because I really want to know how it's going to affect the neighborhood, especially with traffic flow. We have many kids who walk those 5 blocks to Sportsman Park without an adult. So that's the only thing I want to know. That's not really the only thing, but that's one of the major points I want to find out about. I'm not sure if you all have a pictorial vision yet of what this will look like. And are you going to use access roads, the neighborhood access roads? Or are you going to build roads within this property in which they will flow out from the north and the south end? Those are the things I have questions about because I'm really worried about the kids.
I'll take a stab at transportation part of it, and then I'll defer to the applicant on renderings and so forth. But one of the provisions we've got in here is that basically the attempt is that we're going to disperse the traffic out of the site multiple directions. It is contemplated that a lot of it will go north to Liverpool Road, a lot of it will go south to Martin Luther King Boulevard, but there will be some that will disperse eastward towards 2nd and 3rd Street Northwest. But I would envision the bulk of it's going to go straight into the arterial roadway, which is south, or they're going to go up to Liverpool Road, which will give them fairly easy access to US 17.
Is that what you're thinking, or is that what the plan is?
There are conditions in here that address where these trips, where the driveways will be. Specifically, find it here. They're required to do 3 separate connections to 3 separate roadways. So they're mandated to go to 3 different roadways. Again, we don't specifically say Liverpool Road or Martin Luther King, but those will be the easiest for them to access
Okay, so if they're going eastward, which is headed toward Lucerne Park
Yep.
Road, which is already congested 7:15 a.m. to 7:15 p.m. Please tell me, how are they getting out?
Again, they will likely use Liverpool Road. That's the easiest, most direct route
But we won't know until,
until a site plan is submitted.
okay,
which we
and
don't-
we as the
do not.
community will receive the notice of that.
There is no further public hearings regarding a site plan review.
Okay,
But they will have to submit traffic
Traffic
studies. They'll have to go through and meet, all the city's
requirements.
Yeah.
and we will not get anything further along those lines.
That is correct. The final action would be the adoption of the PUD by the city commission.
Well, at least we have that much information. The rest of it, I rest my case with for right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am. You may. Please state your name and address, and Jordan will swear you in.
Thank you.
My name is Candace Tatum. Address is 234 Avenue D, Northwest Winter Haven, Florida 33881.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case shall be the truth?
I do, yes. Thank you all for being here and considering this information. Of course, we look forward to Winter Haven progressing in the PUD. I wish them well with that. And of course, living in the area, like we said, that is my sister. We are concerned about the area in those streets, neighborhood that's adjacent to this particular property. You mentioned that there were or would be approximately 3 outlets. Of course, Mortarpool seems to be obviously the reasonable. South would be Martin Luther King. However, that third,
There is no specific, they're required to have 3, so obviously one would be Third or Second Street.
okay, and that's where my concern is. With regards to Second Street, for example, you have Avenue U, Avenue V. Does the city or will that be utilized?
I can take a stab at that. So those are all public roads. Those public roads, dead end into this property in one way, shape or form. Avenue U, Ware Avenue comes in that area. They all kind of dead end into the side of this property. And so if they choose to connect to one of those roads, yes, there would be a roadway connection onto one of those roadways, into the neighborhood. And so it is anticipated that there would be some trips that would travel east onto the existing roadway network. But when they do submit for their site plan review, that is when we would review their traffic analysis. And that's when we would look at what are those impacts to Mortarpool Road, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and whichever connection the third connection is, whether that be Third or at, Avenue U or Ware or one of those, what is it?
You were
V, Avenue V. So that's where we would analyze how many trips are actually going on the roadway network and provide for, that mitigation.
And what do you mean by trips?
How many vehicle trips would access the roadway based on their professional traffic engineers analysis? Yep. And we understand too, we've been working, with the county in this area for years. We know that the traffic impacts to Avenue Y, the traffic we see on there as well. And Lucerne Park Road, we're working with the state very diligently. We have been for several years on looking for solutions. And they've actually found some funding to get that project going in future years to address traffic on Lucerne Park Road. So, we are aware of those restraints, and we will be looking at that at site plan review.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I don't want to delay the process, but if you could just let me know, because that is a concern as far as living in the area, backing out with this particular PUD or suggested PUD that it can have, maximum capacity of about 1,500 units plus. That's a significant number of vehicles that would be utilizing this particular area. And again, as you mentioned, like Mortarpool, and I think what is a graveyard site, it wouldn't affect people that are living there. He's thinking about if you're backing out, we don't want to lose lives.
Yeah, and I do know that from preliminary discussions that the applicant would prefer, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, the applicant can correct me, that they would prefer a connection to Mortarpool Road. That is one of their preferred connections to get west to US 17.
Right, I understand. But again, you have at this point, what the recommendation in the plans is that there are 3 access ways, which can potentially that third one could use Avenue U, Avenue B, or other.
Yes, ma'am.
correct.
And when will that be determined? That's determined by the city council, from what I understand.
It's a staff level review.
Staff level
Yep,
review.
to make sure they meet all the code requirements. Yes, ma'am.
So any objections to not having one of the roads where we live utilized, where would that take place? Or can that even occur?
It can occur. There is no public notification. So as we're going through the staff review, of the applicant's submittal, we're reviewing it for technical standards. You know, how many vehicle trips are accessing the roadway? Does the roadway have, you know, capacity? Are there sidewalks? Do we need to install sidewalks? That sort of thing. We're reviewing it for all the technical requirements of the code. You know, if there were interested citizens that wanted to view the site plan, it would be public record. They could make a request to view the site plan for sure.
Most definitely. I guess what I would like for that staff review to consider is for the homes that are adjacent to this property, that third way, if it utilizes one of those other roads, is how it would impact the families from adults, elderly, children. And that I myself, having traveled and been around in other communities that are similar to what's being developed here, that there comes a time, sometimes, not saying, but hypothetically, that this particular site with the number of cars that will be on that road or trips, as you mentioned, it could really affect somebody's life, whether it may be missing an appointment because they can't get out of their driveway.
Yep,
So
understood.
that's what I really wanted to know regarding this particular meeting that we're having here, considering this recommendation to rezone this area, and the use is the concern that motor pool, Martin Luther King, yes, there is congestion. Yes, we have been affected over the years. Yes, we do not want to limit or prohibit the progressive Winter Haven. We would love to see it continue to grow and for ones to come together, but we also want to live in unity and at peace still and for those children to enjoy that park. And I don't want to see someone, because now as they put speed humps in the area, they weren't there when I was a child. They're there now. And I had someone just turning left, just going. Obviously, they don't know the neighborhood. And when this particular development, let's just assume that it's going to happen, that is going to be more individuals that are going to be living there that won't know who lives there now. And it puts their lives at risk. So that is my concern, and I would really appreciate it if the staff, if that includes some of you all and so forth, would really consider that. And yes, I would like to make a recommendation of having that preview when it's due, if I can get that information. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else from the public? The applicant, let him respond.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. I was running my mouth, so I didn't hear the first lady's name, but I will give her my card and we will share the architectural renderings. So Lenz and Associates, which is amongst the best architects in the county, they were hired by the city to do the visioning plan, and there's some very nice architecture, and we'll share that. And the property owner retained the same firm because they already had worked on this property, and so it hasn't been decided, but we'll share that information and they can see and get some comfort with the architecture that's being considered. And they'll have my card and email so they can follow up as they wish as the development efforts occur. If you keep in mind, if the multifamily on the northern end starts, we will not be dispersing through the warehouse area to access to the east. So initially, probably the only multifamily residential access will be to the north on Motor Pool Road. Over time, as the site transitions, what you have to remember is if on the south end, it becomes some commercial retail office space and maybe some additional multifamily, that access to the east will allow those neighborhoods to come in and utilize the commercial office and mixed uses without having to go out to Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard to access the site. So I think all of this is in accordance with your codes and your comp plan. The north and south will absolutely be the primary access for this site. The eastern, because as Mr. Sean or Eric pointed out, the appropriateness of dispersing trips, but those two access points will certainly have the majority of any of those trips. But we respect the comments of the neighbors. We have the same interest. I don't think if you kind of look at this map that it would be a very efficient disbursement of trips to go east, but I think there would be some, and we're absolutely fine with as we go through our plans of getting input from neighbors. So again, we appreciate their comments. We appreciate the staff. And again, we stand available for any further questions you have and request your favorable recommendation of our PUD. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So we've reached our time limit on that. Is anybody else from the public? Who's not a chance? No. All right, we will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and reopen the planning portion of the hearing. Any additional questions from staff? Any proposed adjustments from staff to the conditions?
I think I just want to throw one last thing out regarding the legacy industrial uses. And just for some conversation, but if we could maybe limit the, and this is in reference to the destruction provision, maybe to any new leases, that existing leases obviously will have to carry through, but you know, if we could limit that, you know, exemption to the existing leases on the destruction, maybe that's something to think about.
The other concern is extending existing leases, we still have a problem. So, yeah.
Any other thoughts from commissioners on that?
I have a question for the applicant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Campbell.
I think I understood the comment, and we would not object to the condition applying to new leases, with the exception for existing leases. Keep in mind, there are probably built-in renewal rights in those leases. And if there were further extensions sought by a tenant, they're going to want the same conditions. So I think that was kind of where you were going with your question. And so I don't know how, so we're okay with it only applies to existing leases, because I understand in a new lease, we will be on notice and we would not have reconstruction obligations in those leases. But with the existing leases, and they have built-in extensions. And so the only thing that we would have to resolve is, would we be able to further extend a lease for an existing tenant that has those same conditions, as long as that tenant is there?
Well, may I?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Some suggested language. If we were to, at the end of A2, where it says, you know, containing the use is destroyed beyond 50% of fair market value, the right to continue the legacy use shall cease. Unless evidence of a lease entered into by a tenant prior to adoption of the PUD prohibiting such is produced by the applicant, something like that.
I think that's okay, because the leases are the leases that are in place now, so they have the provision or they don't. And with that language, we produce the lease and it has extensions in it. That's part of the lease. I still maybe just, at least for discussion purposes, so everybody's on the same page and it's recorded somewhere. We just talk about if a tenant, and let's say that one of these ends in 3 years and they want to renew it, they of course don't want to change. They don't want to invest in 5 more years. And I say, well, if it gets destroyed, you're out. And so, and we're not going to sit and just extend leases unless it makes economic sense. So I think we're okay with that, as long as we could enter into further extensions with existing tenants. We're not looking to carry this beyond who's there, what rights they have, or what rights they could have if their term is extended further. Because the property owner wants this transition as much as the city wants it, but they need to, you know, be economically reasonable as to, they have tenants, and until the market supports and warrants that transition. And keep in mind, once they invest in the 2 northern tracts with multifamily, with newer multifamily, there's gonna be that energy and synergy to make them want to develop out the mixed uses in that property. So generally, that's okay, and I would just ask that include any further renewals of those leases that are already in place.
Yeah.
Stab at it.
All right,
I
here
think we got it.
I think we got it. We got to combine here. So at the end of shall cease, unless evidence of a lease in existence prior to effective date of this ordinance and any subsequent renewal by the same tenant.
That's fair.
Good. That work, Mr. Campbell?
That's okay. Yes, thank you.
Are
I want
we-
to point out something for this board that's very good about your staff. But for summer vacations, and including me and my daughter, usually these things, they know what you think, they know what's good for the community. They are very good stewards of the city. We tend to work these things out ahead of time and they beat us about the head plenty. So it ends up about the same place. But so sorry for all of us that we're kind of doing this on the run.
So, how do we make a motion on this?
Now,
Yeah, I think we need to read into the revised
Yeah.
conditions.
Well,
and we need to agree on
Term.
how many?
how many months
Okay.
would a use be allowed to be vacant before they lose that right?
If it's normally 6 and we went to 18, I think we can. I mean, it's either 18 or we can find some sort of common ground. I don't know if any of the other commissioners have any thoughts.
I think 60 months is too long.
If it helps any, when Sean first spoke to us, he talked about 36 or 60. And I know you're not surprised which we selected. Because we want, none of us know what tomorrow brings. And so we wanted the maximum flexibility. If it helped that we went with 36 months, the applicant would accept that as the condition. If that was acceptable to this board.
And the sidewalks on the side?
Yeah.
Okay.
So. John, can you read us the revised conditions, just so we have
I will do that, and I'm reading specifically,
with staff?
I'll start with A2 and then I'll move to the sidewalk. Condition A2, permitted uses, legacy warehousing and storage uses up to 181,000 square feet may continue until such time these uses are converted to one of the permitted uses. Should a legacy warehouse or storage use remain vacant for a period greater than 36 months, or if the structure containing the use is destroyed and beyond 50% of fair market value, the right to continue legacy use shall cease unless evidence of a lease is in existence prior to the effective date of this ordinance and any subsequent renewal by the same tenant. And then the other small change was relating to D2, and I'm gonna do this on the fly, but it's a minimum 5-foot sidewalk shall be installed on a minimum one side of all internal streets or driveways.
And then do you need to read something about the 36?
Yeah.
You did.
Oh, you
Yeah.
did, okay. It was in the.
All right. Any other questions from staff or from commissioners?
No, but I would make a motion that we recommend approval of case number P 23-37, request by Tim Campbell to rezone a parcel from industrial light I1 zoning to district planned unit development PUD zoning district. General location 2200 3rd Street Northwest. The area covered by this request is 22.57 plus or minus acres. As presented in the fact sheet and as presented the amendments that were agreed upon in the meeting.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right,
Thank you, board members. Thank you, staff.
thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next case number P 23-38. Administrative request to amend the Winter Haven Code of Ordinances, Chapter 21, Article 3, Division 2, Section 21 through 122 for the purpose of adding roadway classifications to the Land Development Code.
Okay, I'm also presenting this one. This one's kind of more of a cleanup in the code and to frankly, to facilitate the public's use of the overall code document, but A little background, classification of the city streets and roadways are presently contained in chapter 15, street sidewalks and other public places. Current classifications date to 1959. This section has not been updated in 60 years plus. So, and they definitely do not reflect new travel patterns or expansion of the city. This request simply moves the street and roadway classifications to chapter 21, section 21-122. Specifically, these changes accomplish the following. Includes these classifications in the same chapter as the city zoning districts. That's important because many of our zoning districts now contain provisions that reference the street classification. So it's good to have these in the same chapter of the code. It's easier for someone to move back and forth between the requirements. Secondly, it updates the street and roadway list to add new roadways, which are either new or have been annexed into the city over the years. There are several of those. And finally, changes of the classifications of certain streets and roadways in which the character has clearly changed since 1959. A good example, believe it or not, Avenue A Northeast, believe it or not, is classified as an arterial today in the code. It is a residential street. And then finally, the last small change we made is we've added a minimum right-of-way width for an alley of 20 feet. And we've split them in the right-of-way requirements for collector roadways into 2-lane and 3-lane roadways. That just addresses some ongoing deficiencies in the code. One, there's currently no minimum for an alley yet. Typically, you need about 20 feet to have an effective alley work. And two, we are starting to develop more collector roadways. Some have to be larger than others. So we felt dividing this into 2-lane and 3-lane was appropriate. Each has a different right of way with requirement, and therefore we've added that in. So that does conclude my presentation, and staff does recommend approval of this request and is forwarding the city commission for final action.
Commissioners, any questions? All right, we'll close the planning portion of the hearing and open the public portion. Anybody from the public wishing to speak for or against? All right, seeing as we have none, we will close the public portion and reopen the planning portion of the hearing, and we'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to recommend approval of case number P-23-38, administrative request to amend the Winter Haven Code of Ordinances, chapter 21, article 3, division 2, section 21 through 122 for the purpose of adding roadway classifications to the land development code as presented in fact sheet. Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Staff other business.
Okay, past items. This one's a little unusual. I'll start with the easy one. The Shops at Country Club is the PUD out there on Country Club Road and Dundee Road. That one's moving forward to the city commission during the month of July. It should have its final hearing on July 24th. The other items that were on that agenda, the administrative rezoning of a good portion of the area southwest of downtown to C1. Amendments to the permitted uses in the C1 zoning district and banquet halls. Those have all unfortunately been tabled. Give a little background. This past legislative session, Senate Bill 250 was passed by the legislature. A couple weeks ago, the governor signed that legislation, and that essentially putting in simple terms, if it's perceived that we're creating a development order or requirement that is more restrictive, we're preempted from doing that until October of 2024.
And retroactive back to September of 2022.
Yep. That's why those have been tabled for now. I think the idea is we're going to revisit these when time's appropriate, but for right now, they're going to just sit tabled.
There were any property owners in that area that wanted that, can they apply individually?
Yes, we can move forward with,
If it's requested.
with requests, yes.
It's not spot zoning and.
Right.
The other rules apply. I would say we're probably not gonna be moving forward a lot of code changes going forward unless it's very obvious, simple cleanup or clarification language. But I think we're gonna have to take a pause on any significant updates to the code. So. And that's all I have. Oh, September meeting date. Just want to kind of put in your mind, it is the day after Labor Day. I do not know if we're going to have a meeting on that date yet or not. We're kind of waiting on one item. It's still floating around for September, but if we do happen to have that meeting, will the day after Labor Day work on everyone's schedule? I believe it's September 5th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be.
Okay, so if we have a case, we'll proceed on September 5th. So,
And we'll let you know for sure at the next meeting.
and then, that's it from staff.
So the September meeting is projected to be
September 5th,
5th.
if we hold it, if this, one case, we're waiting on some missing information, and they don't provide that to us. When we need it to move forward, then that meeting will be canceled and we'll notify you appropriately.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners or staff? All right. We're adjourned.
We did it.
Easy.
Yeah, this is the most people we have had in a long time.